Appreciate you all getting up early on Saturday morning to come and join us. They got a mic for me this morning. I'm not sure I need it, but some of the other folks this morning might. So before we get going, if you wouldn't, if fine, if you're able, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For those of you that may not know me, my name is Adam Holiday. I'm one of the members of the Board of Trustees from Township. So again, I appreciate everybody being here again this morning. A couple of just, housekeeping items before we turn it over and get some things going here this morning. Logistic-wise, bathrooms just down the hall to the left. We do have a room with refreshments out there for everybody too when we take some breaks. And the only other thing that I might mention is the crowd is a little bit more sparse than we were in our last meeting. So we do have the assistance of the mic today, but maybe after the first break, if everybody wants to migrate forward into the first half of those rows or so, I think that would be fantastic. Just that way, if anything, we can hear the group participation a little bit better. A lot has happened, I think, since the last meeting. We've been able to kick off the initial meeting for the steering committee. Huge appreciation towards, our own communications committee, the team at Crossroads, and Crowd for helping us get that going. I thought the first meeting was great. Really looking forward to hearing some more from that and about that as things continue on. We talked at length, Trustee Trader did at our last meeting about some of the developments, in the Blendon Township area with the city of Columbus and some things like that going on, which I'm sure we'll reiterate again today just to make sure that there's plenty of clarity there. And so, a lot has developed, and I think some of the biggest takeaways for me from that original meeting is that we still have some profound opportunity to make sure that our township is educated on not only what is going on, but what can go on, right? How some of these things work. And we cover a lot of these things almost ad nauseum in the monthly meetings with the board, but I realize that coming to that monthly meeting in the evening, during the week, isn't very realistic for everyone. So as part of my kind of spiel this morning, John, if you'll allow me, there was about 3 things I wanted to just reiterate to the group while I have the opportunity for an audience, right? The first thing is taxes. I heard in the last meeting, I heard groups talking about tax quite a bit. And I know that, especially in Delaware County, property tax is something that we're often very attuned to and how it continues to go up. Some might argue that that's not necessarily a bad thing, but those aren't probably the people that are paying that property tax, right? They're the ones that are receiving it. And so the point I wanted to reiterate is your township is not a taxing authority. We have no ability to tax any of the residents, be it on income or property, right? So all of that is dictated by the county in which you live and then trickles up from there. So I just felt that was very important to identify. Especially as we talk about ways to hopefully incentivize, the farmers and the larger property owners, especially on the perimeter of the township. The annexation word is kind of the one that gets everybody's attention here lately. Annexation of the south side of Hoover Reservoir. It's important to understand, right? Like, annexation is not a thing that happens to a property owner. Annexation is something a property owner seeks out. Right? And, we talked about this at the last BOT meeting, but Columbus already owned the south half of Hoover Reservoir as a property owner, not a municipality. They essentially annexed it to themselves, right? And so I think that we just have to make sure that we understand that, because when we talk about annexation, the landowner, that property owner, is not a victim. They are the ones that sought it out. And so it's very important to understand that that's how that works. Our focus is to make sure that we're providing enough resources and capability for Harlan Township and the folks that are interested in coming here, that those property owners don't feel like they have to annex, that the new property owner doesn't have to annex to be able to have the development that they want, that they're interested in. And to me, I think that brings it kind of full circle into some of these other things we were talking about, right? I've heard people say we've got to figure out ways to incentivize the property owners on the perimeter of the township. We've got to find ways to incentivize the farmers not to sell their land. There are programs at the state and federal level that can incentivize farmers. And I know I see some in this room that a Century Farm, right? And there are some that will incentivize, but we're talking single-digit income tax credit incentives. When Intel bought the 750 acres, they paid $111 million, I think is right. That's about $148,000 an acre. When I first looked at moving into Harlan Township with my family in 2017, I found an 8-acre lot that was $120,000. That's $15,000 per acre, not 148, right? And then most recently, a little chunk off of Vans Valley sold to Amazon. I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with that. If you're not, you probably should be. That's not a next week project. I think it's going to be, 2030 before we see anything there. But that's a chunk of property right there, just up the street from where we sit right now. It sold for $54 million. And so, I wouldn't want to assume the opinions or feelings of any first, second, third, sixth generation farmers in our township, but that is a generational wealth that is hard to ignore and hard to turn down for a 3.99% income tax credit. So again, there's a lot of numbers, there's a lot of data, and there's a lot of minutia that flies around when it comes to these situations. But what it all boils down to is this meeting, the last meeting, all the meetings that we will have in the future on these topics is meant so that we can guide our township in the direction that we want it to go as best we can. So I hope that makes sense to everyone. And obviously, we'll all be around after the meeting to have further conversation about it. But again, what's most important is that all of you are sitting in the room here this morning. We are still looking for more people to be involved in the process, especially folks that are newer to Harlan Township. So please, make sure you're continuing to spread the word with your neighbors and community to get people involved. But with that, I'll turn it over to Holly Knight.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and welcome everybody. I wanted to start off this morning by just having by raise of hands. How many of you were at the first community meeting that we had a month ago? Good. So about 90%. We do have some new faces. So we will be talking a little bit of a recap of what we talked about at that meeting, just to bring any new folks up to speed onto where we are. So I'm going to be reviewing the one handout that you picked up, which is our SOAR document. It's the strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. I'm going to be reviewing that because that's the activity that we did at the last meeting. And then I'm also going to be talking about the steering committee, who our 7 members are, and giving a brief recap of our first meeting and kind of where we're going with that. From there, I'm going to be introducing Angela Cryle, who is our sub-consultant in communications. She is going to be introducing the soup jar activity, which is the second handout that you picked up when you came in. And we also are going to have a testimonial from at least one of our steering committee members who has completed that activity, so she can share her experience with that, because we're going to be asking some of you to assist in doing that similar activity. From there, she's going to turn it over to John, Trustee John Trainer, who is going to be giving his update on development activities that Adam alluded to that was mentioned at the last trustees meeting, so that everyone can be refreshed on that presentation, or if you haven't heard it, be informed about what is going on in and around Harlan Township. From there, we're going to break out into sessions again, so with the 4 different corners like we did at the last meeting. But we're going to be talking about one specific category of collaboration and communications, and wanting to learn more about, from the residents, how you feel the communications and the collaboration are within the township. What are the strengths and where are the weaknesses that we can improve on those aspects, because that's something that has risen to the top as we have been going through our activities. And then after that activity, we'll come back together, report out, and then Trustee Taylor will talk about next steps. So I just felt it was important to outline our morning today before we got started. So, let's talk a little bit about the last meeting. So if you get your handout that you have, it says community store on it. This is a take on a SWOT analysis. So if some of you are in the business world, you may have done a SWOT analysis in the past, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We wanted that, it was Angela's idea, I think it's a great idea, to be more aspirational and to look more into the future of what we want to be as a township. So we talked about doing this SOAR activity. How can we soar into the future, and what are our aspirations? So we were able to break down into the 4 quadrants of about, we had over 100 people here at the last meeting. About 30 people, it was 120 altogether, about 30 people in each group. And in those groups, each group identified strengths, opportunities, and their aspirations. Angela talked about Gold Star businesses. When you visit a business, what are the aspirations, what are the attributes that you see in those businesses? What do they do to make you want to come back? And what do they do to make you enjoy their business and want you to be in their business? And she asked you to translate that into your aspirations for Harlan Township. If you were to fast forward 50 years into the future, as Trustee Trainer has said, parachute down into the township, what would you want to see? So that's the activity that we did at the last meeting. And so this document summarizes those strengths and opportunities, and you will see that there were a lot of cross sections from the 4 different groups. When we brought it all together, these are the categories that we came up with as far as the cross sections of all the different groups. So rural charm, natural beauty, community and people focused. These are all strengths. Quality of life and atmosphere. Accessibility and convenience. Government and infrastructure, making sure that your local government is efficient. The schools are there and working well, funded well. EMS and fire services continue to provide the high quality services that they provide today. As far as the opportunities, making sure that we're growing in a smart way. Everyone knows that development is happening in and around Harlan Township. How do we do it in the most efficient, sustainable, and smart way that we can do it? Support the local economy and businesses. How can we make sure that we are retaining our families that are here and being multi-generational as we move forward as a community? Making sure that we have a place for our children and grandchildren to continue to live. And how do we maintain that township rural character? These are all opportunities that we have, and we need to seize the day and make sure that we are doing those as we are moving forward as a community. And we believe that the way to do that, and I think that it showed in what the group said, making sure that there's community engagement and involvement. And so that's why we're focusing on that today. How can we get the community more involved as we move forward? And then finally, our aspirations. So what are those Gold Star aspirations of Harlan Township? And these are really, once these aspirations were identified, almost become the guiding pillars of the strategic plan. They become the priorities as we move forward with this plan. And so what we're seeing in the first meeting, and what we're going to ask to do through some of these soup sessions is to validate these, or to say either we need to go a different direction. But what came out of the last meeting was that we want to be a community that has balanced growth and development. We want to be a community that has great community engagement and collaboration. We want to be a community that has safety and well-being in mind, and that our residents are safe as we develop into the future. We want a community that maintains its rural lifestyle and autonomy, something that preserves We want to be a community that has preservation and sustainability in mind as it moves forward through open space and making sure that the agricultural economy is still recognized as it goes forward. We want to be a community with identity and pride, and that we have a vibrant and quality of life as we move forward. So as we move into the next steps, those are the guiding principles that we will be utilizing, unless we hear otherwise through some of these other activities we're going to take, that we need to take a different direction. So with that, also we held our first steering committee meeting, and I did think it was a great meeting. I think we have some great committee members that are represent a cross section of the township. So we have Alice Uhas, who is, Uhas. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. And if I mispronounce anyone's name, please let me know. If you want to get up, if you're all here, when you're here and I say your name, you want to get up and say who you are and give a brief description of your background. I think that was great.
Thank you, Holly. I'm Alice Uhas. I live on Fanshawe Road at Keene, and my family has been in Harwood Township since 1998. When I was 6 months pregnant with our first son, and so the kids went to Big Walnut. We go to a church in this community. We just love Harwood Township, and we moved to it for its rural character. So, if anybody lives in the area, we're going to be holding Maureen, our chairwoman, is across the street from me. We're going to be holding soup sessions in our area. So if you're interested in attending, we'd love for you to come and talk about our wonderful township. Thank you.
How do you spell your last name?
Yuhas. It's Hungarian for shepherd.
And I'm going to move it over to Maureen, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Hi, I'm Maureen Smith. I'm Allison's neighbor. I've been in the township since 1995. There were 15 acres of 15 cows on it when I moved in. Now there's at least 6 houses or something like that. But I watched the township change. But I live up there just at Center Keene Road. And if anybody drives around there, yes, I'm the one with the giant garden that's around it. And so I have chickens. And they do run around, so stop and by. But that's, I love the township. I like the rural character. I'm close to the land. I think that a lot of us feel the same way. We like to see open skies and open fields.
Thank you. And I want to say that Maureen, is this saying now? Maureen was very generous in stepping up and being the chair of the committee. So thank you for volunteering for that. And then we have Erica. Where's Erica? Not Amy. Well, it's always called Erica. I'm sorry. Amy Clark.
Hi, my name is Amy Clark. Can't talk in circles, so I'll just say where I am. So I am we live on Green Brook Road. We have 12 grandchildren, and 11 of them are in the school district, so we have a vested interest not only because we live here, but we also have, our grandchildren are going to be in the school district for at least another 18 years. We own a real estate company and have been in business in the Western, all of this area, all of Delaware County as well, since 2002. So we understand development. We've done a lot personally with representing farmers, selling, and choosing annexation. So I want you to make sure you heard what was said today. It's not that the city is trying to take over a farm. It really is initiated, and I've represented some of those farmers, not so far in Harlan Township, but I can tell you this is what happened. So they're not the victim, they are the one who's looking for an opportunity. So I really want you to make sure that you catch that. And then I'll share about the soup session. This is my husband, Brad, one of our kids.
Thank you. Do I see Jeff here? Is Jeff Ferguson here? Okay, so Jeff is not here. He wasn't sure if he was going to make it or not. He is a Columbus firefighter, so sometimes his schedule being 2 days on or 1 day on, 2 days off, doesn't allow him to be at Saturday meetings, but, it's important to know that, Jeff brings a public safety perspective to the community and to the committee, so we thought it was important to have his viewpoint as we go forward. Dutch?
Thanks. My name is Jeff Holland. I live on Harlem Road, north of Smothers and south of Fancher. So I'm in the heart of the, hey, you're on the edge, you're gonna be one of the first opportunities for somebody to say, I wanna develop your land. Which is not what we want, so I'm glad that it's gonna be a choice. My wife and I have lived here since 1985. We've got 3 kids. I've been in IT for another 2 years, and then I'm going to retire, so I'll be here for a while.
Thank you. Is Tom Eldred here? There he is.
Good morning. My name is Tom Eldred. We live closer to your mom. Eldred, E-L-D-R-E-D. And we've been here for 30 years. And, my business is agriculture, and I still work with you guys around here a bit. And we've loved the county, or the, county and the township very, very much. And, we'll work hard to keep the waste down. That's the main. Thank you.
And I don't think Chris is here. I haven't seen him. I think he said he's on vacation this week, so he apologized. Chris Chirax, his background is he used to be the COO, I believe, of Ohio Health. He has a lot of background in understanding how to cite different economic development projects. He served on a number of Chamber of Commerce's in his role at Ohio Health, and brings an economic development perspective to the community. So you can see through the different backgrounds of the members that we really have all different sectors represented. We don't necessarily have all of the geography of the township represented, and we recognize that as a committee, and they are looking at ways to ensure that every portion of the township is represented. But we felt that it was important to have those different sectors, and then we can accommodate the geography, lack, I guess, of geography as we go forward. So with that, our first committee meeting was more of a, hey, get to know you, we did some icebreakers. We went over the SOAR activity. I confirmed with them that they felt that it accurately represented the first meeting, because they had all been at the first meeting. So that's why we felt comfortable with handing that document out today, because they have had their eyes on it and gave us a head nod, yes, that looks good, that it represents it. And then we talked about, what's your perspective of what's happened over the last several years, and how do you feel that as this committee we can move forward? So we talked about that a little bit, and then acknowledging that there are a number of documents that have been adopted over the years that the committee needed to familiarize themselves with. So starting with the comprehensive plan from 2021, the quick strategy guide from 2023, all the overlay districts that have been adopted. So those have all been distributed to the committee members. Their homework was to read them and be prepared to discuss them at our next meeting in April. And that way, just getting that knowledge building. Because one thing is that most of the committee members, I think there's only one that had participated in previous activities. Most of them are new. So having newer perspectives is part of that, part of this process as we move forward. But they have to have the educational background of what has taken place over the last 3 years to make sure we're making informed decisions as we go forward. So with that, that is all I have as far as recap of where we've been. I'm going to turn it over to Angela, who's going to talk about the soup section. process from a communications perspective, and trying to help make sure that we get information out and receive information back as efficiently and effectively as possible throughout this process. I cannot take credit for this idea. Louis Greenwell was the person who brought this to me at our last session. But we are looking for a way to really dive into the community and get good, candid feedback about where we're going and what we're doing. And I don't know about you all, but some of the best conversations I have about what I think and where I think our community should go where I live happen over a meal or a coffee with friends and family who I'm familiar with, who I know, and I'm comfortable sharing my opinions. And so we wanted to give that opportunity to you so that you and others in the community don't feel that you have to come to a big forum like this to share your thoughts. It's much more, I don't know about you guys, but it's much more comfortable for me when I'm around people that I know and trust to be able to give my true, honest opinions. So that is what we have created these soup sessions for. We put them in a little jar to make it cute and convenient. But inside these soup session jars is a guide of what you can do to facilitate your soup session. It provides ideas around guiding the conversation so that it's good and open, good communication, good dialogue, and people feel heard and people have the opportunity to listen. And then it also provides a mechanism for you to provide the feedback from that session back to us so that we can incorporate it into what we hear today, what we heard at our last conversation, and then come back to the community with those strategic pillars that are going to guide us moving forward. It does not have to be over soup. That was just an idea because it's dreary outside this time of year, and I use a lot of soup in my family for crock pot cooking, so it's easy and fun to do. But you can have coffee, you can just bring people over, you don't have to feed them if you don't want, but I find food helps people have better conversations. So you can pick one of these up today if you are interested in having one with your family and neighbors and friends. We have about 20 of them in the hallway here. Please don't take one unless you intend to do this, because we really want people who are planning to have these conversations and provide the feedback to take them. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy, because she has actually held one of these. She can give you all some feedback about how to do it and what her experience is like. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, and good morning again. So I can tell you that overall, a lot of our feedback is going to be very similar. So if you're looking for some confirmation of what the first, bigger group did, a lot of those there. There are a few things that I want to point out. I'll go through all of these, but there are a couple that I want to kind of give you maybe a picture of what we discussed. So keeping the rural feel of low density housing, same small town feel, keeping Delaware County, Harlan Township infrastructure, government and services, that aligned as well. A more developed community center. What we discovered was there does seem to be a disconnect between multi-generational Harlan Township and people that have come in the last 5, 6, 7, 10 years. And here's how we knew this. Someone has been in the township forever, in a 100-year-old farm, and was talking about the different activities that are over by the fire station and that kind of thing. Most of the new people went, over? Like we don't, there's a sign that says come to dinner or thank you for this or that, but there's a disconnect that we have seen between I've been here forever and gosh, I knew, and I don't really feel that connection. So it would be very cool to see a community center really created, maybe expanded upon, where there's larger community gatherings. We dreamed of something like, could there be a place that development's going to happen? Let me just say that. If we really aren't going to just sit here frozen in time and development actually happens, then what would we want it to be, if that makes sense? So picture Powell, little downtown Powell, downtown Galena. Is there a place where we would be able to go and have a cup of coffee together and that kind of thing? So don't know what could be developed there. We did have folks talk about more parks, walking paths, bike paths. I think it was kind of mentioned in the feedback from the first one. And the question is, could Harlan Township be a destination place as a unique rural community? Rural, still rural, but something that really is a destination place where someone might go, well, I'd really love to go up to Harlan Township and have a cup of coffee. It's so cute, right? That kind of thing. All of us, you know, not opposed to a win-win, because obviously that's what we want, but no one wants annexation. I think that's very clear. In terms of roads being developed, you know, if there's growth, there's gonna be roads, there's gonna be infrastructure. Somebody brought up just a mental picture. I think this is why it helps to think about different communities and go, oh, what do they look like? Oh yeah, gosh, should we do that? Somebody brought up Muirfield. If you go up and down Muirfield, a lot of areas in Dublin, you're gonna see bigger roads because they need that capacity to move that traffic, but there's landscape medians in between, there's trees. It doesn't look like, wow, I just threw in a 4-lane road. So there's ways to do roads and infrastructure, so we want to see something like that. There was talk about the east-west corridor. Apparently, used to be, the talk was that was going to be Fancher Road, then something that was presented recently, at least that I saw, is that that would be more likely to be Center Village, and that's from the Delaware County Engineers Office is saying that. So they're gonna probably talk about that today. So our group said Fancher, they don't wanna see Center Village, wide to 4 lanes and to become a major resource corridor. One thing to think of is wanting to understand Delaware County's comprehensive plan, because Delaware County has a full plan of what they love to see here. And then if we come up with one in Harlem Township, when those things don't align, who wins? Delaware County, maybe. Like, we want to understand that when those things collide, who takes precedence? Let's see. And then I think you guys mentioned economic incentives to encourage farmers to stay invested here. Big question. I'd love to have that answer today, if possible. In the end, who's the final decision maker on adopting the strategic plan? Is there a voting opportunity? Is this a township decision? So we can gather all the feedback, which we will, but who's the final decision maker? Okay, so I'd love to know that. And then the other place to really think about is downtown New Albany. You know, downtown New Albany was not, it looks old. You go to the Starbucks there or the Rusty Bucket, and it looks like a historic center. It's not, clearly, right? It's new, but they built it with very, very strict architectural standards for Georgia Colonial. So you can make something look old when it's new. The Starbucks doesn't look like a Starbucks, Taco Bell doesn't look like a Taco Bell, nothing will look like that because they're very, very, very strict. We would want to see strict architectural standards for our own township. That if there's growth coming in, which will happen, that it needs to look and feel like Harlem Township. And they're very, very, that's not hard to do. That just means Taco Bell can't look like Taco Bell. So we don't have to drive past something that just absolutely doesn't seem to align with who we are and what this township feels like. So that's what we're doing.
Amy, how many people did you have at your 19. 19? Wow, that's a lot. Great job. Food.
So there is a bunch of jars out in the hallway here over on the counter, heading toward the restrooms. If you take one, please sign it out so that we know that you took one. Just your name and phone number is fine. But we would love for you to engage people who haven't come to these sessions so that we can hear different ideas, different thoughts. If we don't get that input from folks, we will go with the input that we have, right? And so we want input. That's what your trustees have charged us with getting for them. So please, if you are interested in doing that, please do. We really encourage you. And I think I'm turning it over to Trustee Trainer.
Thank you. Thanks for the great input so far this morning. It's very helpful. And thanks for your willingness to give of your time and investment to Harlem Township and to this process. My purpose this morning is to give you an update on what's happening around the township and strategic engagements upon which the trustees have been embarked over the last several months. Next slide. If I try to capture the problem that has been facing us since spring of last year, I put it in the form of a question. Can Harlem Township have a significant role in determining its own future? I was the zoning inspector from 2013 to 2018, and then went on active duty with the Air Force from 18 until 24 outside of the township. I actually moved back to Harlem Township on April the 19th, 2024. Does anybody know what was happening in the township in April of 2024? Let me just say that I came back to a very different township than the township I had left. I went to a trustee meeting that month and saw things occur that I never dreamed would occur in a township meeting in Harlem Township. And recognized that we were in a difficult place, that trust had broken down between the residents and the leadership, and that the future of the township was very much in question. And so I want to provide a little bit of a backdrop to where we are currently and where we want to go. Next slide. So even before the conversation about a merger with Westerville occurred, the township had already been engaged in robust strategic planning. The zoning commission had taken upon themselves to develop a comprehensive plan that is incredibly thorough, that does provide for architectural standards and for development in and around the township, and in particular, is defensive in some ways around our perimeter and the borders of Harlem Township. After the Intel announcement in 2022, the trustees recognized the need to continue that planning process. And so I commissioned a strategic planning committee that then embarked upon first kind of a fact-finding mission around the impact of this announcement and the impact of the development that was occurring around us, and how could the township best respond to that. During that process, Holloway's firm was hired, Crossroads Community Planning, and they developed a quick strategy guide that became an addendum to that initial comprehensive plan. That if you take the time to read it, it's online, very available. It's a very informative and very good response to what was happening at the time, and kind of provides, again, a more thorough and careful layered defense for the township in case development were to happen to us, not with us. Out of the process of this, a conversation began to occur with the city of Westerville. In retrospect, I kind of look at it as from an outsider's perspective, having not been here. I understand why that conversation occurred, I think, because in the large scheme of things, if you were to place the options for Harlem Township down, that looked like a viable option at the time. And in some ways, it's a little bit of a push the easy button, in that it solves a number of problems that the township was facing at the time. So that conversation unfolded. And unfortunately, I look at it as kind of a process crime. There was a communication breakdown that then resulted in a breakdown of trust and kind of an implosion that occurred. Two trustees resigned, the township required new leadership, and a refocus on how do we, as a township, preserve or secure our own future, that is, without the help or riding on the shoulders of a municipality that's neighboring to us. We recognize that change is coming. Harlem Township has been a tabula rasa, a carte blanche, a blank slate. We have dwelled securely on the eastern side of Hoover Reservoir for decades. And because of our geographical location, we have been able to kind of be in our own silo, to be insulated from the development that's been occurring around us. We haven't been that concerned about what's happening up in Delaware County. In fact, our attitude has kind of been, you stay up there, we'll stay down here, and we'll kind of dwell happily apart from one another. And we've been able to do that for decades. But we recognize we can no longer do that. That this position, when you look at what's happening around us, is actually very unique. That Harlem Township dwells in the northeast corner of Delaware County with, at this point in time, zero infrastructure. That's amazing. That no one has built multi-family units in Harlem Township. That there are not significant commercial or industrial developments in Harlem Township. And so, to be honest with ourselves, we're incredibly fortunate to be in this position. But we recognize as we look at the world around us, it is changing. The beauty is that it's not changing as fast as we thought it might. Because with each new announcement about Intel, it's being pushed back. We get a little bit more time. A little bit more time to think about our future and how we might be able to have some say in what that looks like. So, Columbus is building a sewage run. They estimate its completion right now to be July of 26. Delaware County has hired a group to look at the design of the first line that's going to come off that trunk. There are options on the table for what that might be. We don't know specifically if that goes right up Harlem Road, or if that goes east for a ways across the bottom of the township and then cuts across north, across Fancher, but aiming for those fields that are behind the line of houses along Fancher Road. When that occurs, base design, then it's built, it's going to be built 27, 28, that's when development is going to begin to occur in Harlem Township, and our world is going to change. That is an inevitable fact of life. How do we respond to that change? I wanted to also make a note that we have been engaged, Adam has been engaged with the city of Galena. Galena has sewer. The Ohio EPA 208 plan shows Galena providing sewer to the far northwest corner of our township. And so we're currently in discussion with Galena for them to provide that sewer with the promise of non-annexation and with a JET agreement. That's very important and helps us secure that corner of the township. Next slide. Where do we want to grow? These are the strategic priorities that have been identified by the residents. These are the same priorities that are the aspirations that we just went over. We feel it's important for the residents to communicate to the trustees what these priorities are, not for us to dictate to you what they should be. This is a living document. The work that you're going to continue to do in your ongoing discussions will continue to inform and edit, add to, subtract from these things. There are a couple up there in bold that have been very important over the course of the past year because they've been driving our discussions and our work. The first one is autonomy. That is, whenever we engage in a conversation with another municipality and they ask, what is your number one strategic priority? It is autonomy. That is, if you parachute into Center Village in 2050, you parachute into Harlem Township. Not the city of Westerville, not the city of Columbus, but Harlem Township. And the second one, community engagement and collaboration. We absolutely cannot walk down this path by ourselves. We need to do it hand in hand with the communities around us in partnership. in league with, as their strategic priorities and our strategic priorities align, being collaborative and working forward. And those are the conversations upon which we've been engaged. Next slide. So, local stakeholders. This is a list of all the communities around us, and I just want to talk briefly about each one and where they are. Westerville is landlocked. They've developed just about every square acre in their community. If I was developing the city of Westerville, I would have a sincere desire to expand in Harlem Township. It is their eastern neighborhood. When I went to meet with the leadership in Westerville, I heard 3 messages. Columbus is bad, you are powerless, and we want to be your new BFF. I asked the leadership, can you articulate for me what the strategic priorities of Harlem Township are? Blank stare. I asked the leadership, do you think there's a collision of cultures between the city of Westerville and Harlem Township? Could not articulate how that might be a conflict. That we actually have residents that moved out of Westerville because they wanted to be in Harlem. It was an indication that they viewed Harlem Township as an economic opportunity, and I believe actually has strategic goals that expand beyond Harlem Township to the northeast. New Albany. When you talk to Joe Stefanoff, he says, we are very interested in having Harlem Township develop in a well-intentional, well-planned way. We have absolutely no interest in annexation into Harlem Township. Our schools are where our schools want to be. We've reached our population limit. We have no interest in growing. New Albany right now is focused on the Route 62 corridor and on the hamlet at Central College and 605. They are very interested in helping us become that destination community where someone in New Albany says on a Friday night in 2040, hey, let's go up to Center Village and have dinner at that great little restaurant that's in that community. There are about 20 or 30 things, he said, that are part of the secret recipe that helped New Albany become the community that it is, the well-planned community that it is. They are more than happy, Jennifer Chrysler is their city planner, to come alongside us and help us in a planning process so that we have the same kind of well-intentioned planning as our community knows. Galena, we've talked about where they are with sewer. They have economic needs, they want to develop, they want to grow. That aligns with our needs as well in that northwest corner. We're well aware that Sunbury is expanding into Trenton Township, that they've annexed a large portion of it. What's fascinating is that New Albany Company purchased that land before Sunbury annexed it. Important, have good relationships with the power brokers, the stakeholders that are in your neighborhood. We would be very foolish as a township if we were not engaged in conversations with New Albany and New Albany Company, because these are the real movers and shakers around us. And they're the ones that ultimately will help us partner with those commercial and industrial partners that will help us economically to achieve our goal of being what I call a premier rural residential community in southeast Delaware County. Johnstown, they're overwhelmed. They are trying to respond to the incredible growth that's occurring around them, and they have economic challenges. So it's very much an internal focus in trying to bring in those commercial and industrial partners that make their city sustainable, which at the current time, they're struggling. Columbus. Columbus is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. A friend said to me, John, if you really want to secure the township's future, you have to have a conversation with Columbus. And so in October of last year, we went and met with Director Stevenson in our first initial meeting. And I asked him, what's your first strategic priority when you engage with a township? And he said, annexation. I said, thank you for your honesty. What's your second strategic priority? Housing. Columbus is struggling with housing. They're very internally focused right now on providing what we're going to call workforce housing for Columbus. Columbus looks at Cleveland and Cincinnati, and they see two cities that have become landlocked by the suburbs around them. And you'll notice that administrations in Columbus have always kept these tentacles growing out across the suburbs so that Columbus is not landlocked, that they can continue to grow. There was a more serious mindset of annexing in previous administrations. The current administration is not interested in annexation as much as they are focused on the housing issue and not overextending their services. The big deal in Central Ohio is really twofold: water and energy. Water and energy. And so when Columbus chose to annex the reservoir, they were protecting their water resources from the city of Westerly. And you're going to see Columbus continue to annex around the northern portion of the reservoir, over Genoa Township, so that they secure those water resources. That's vitally important to them. So, we've had a second meeting with Columbus. We went into further detail about our desire, autonomy, and their desires. And one of the questions asked in the second meeting was, do you have any desire for the city of Westerville to annex any portion of your township? And the answer was a resounding no, we do not. And recognize that when Columbus annexed into Blooming Township and up to Smothers Road, they effectively cut off Westerville from annexing across the reservoir. It would be very difficult for them to come across Southern Road because there are so many estate kind of homes and properties across Sunbury Road, that really makes annexation incredibly difficult. And the deputy director called me a couple weeks ago on the Monday when that meeting occurred. He said, come to city council now. And he said, hey, I just want you to know what's happening. And it was appreciated because that, in effect, secured us from the city of Western. And they recognize, as I mentioned, that there are strategic brokers that are making decisions at a high level that affect our future. No one came to the city of Johnstown and said, hey, do you want Intel building a plant just outside your environments? Those decisions have already been made at a much higher level. There are strategic brokers that were very interested in Westerville coming into Harlem Township. Recognize you're dealing with those kind of brokers and these kinds of discussions. And so you have to have significant relationships with the powers that be. Next slide. So, what I call courses of action or potential next steps. Merge with or be annexed by. Notice that I crossed that out because I really think that's a rapidly diminishing possibility. The city of Westerville. I believe that if township leadership had a couple years ago said, what can we possibly do to secure our future, and put up merge with Westerville as a possibility, and then explored that possibility in open conversation with the residents, and maybe explored it as the second, third, fourth, or fifth possibility, after they recognized we'll never secure our future, that it may have been more palatable to the residents. At this point in time, could it be that in 10 years, there are trustees up here that say, hey, we're done, the best thing for us to do is to merge with Westerville? I think that's worst case scenario. Could it occur? Maybe. Hope it doesn't, but it might. So I don't take it completely off the table, but at this point in time, for us to merge with Westerville, we would fail to receive our strategic priority of autonomy because we basically give away the farm. We would fail to achieve the strategic priority of engagement and collaboration as a township, because then we would be engaging as the city of Westerville. They would be engaging on our behalf. And then finally, the very concept of strategic planning and vision for the community, it's not ours anymore. Suddenly, it's Westerville's vision for our township as the township fades into the distance. So I don't view this as the best option for the township. However, can we craft an economic partnership with Columbus and others? And notice that I think that we can achieve our strategic goals. So that on Tuesday of this coming week, Columbus is going to come up to Delaware County, and we're going to sit down at a table with them, and we're going to have a conversation around some major talking points. Next slide. These are Columbus's talking points in regard to the merger with Blendon Township. So here's what their PR folks put out. And notice that I go ahead and read through those. They're important. I'm not going to read through them for you, but I highlighted in bold an important phrase. Does not have any plans to annex in southeast Delaware County. That is huge. The city of Columbus has no intention to annex any portion of Harlem Township. They're focused elsewhere. They want to have a collaborative relationship with Harlem Township. They want to have a joint economic development district with Harlem Township. They want to talk about housing with Harlem Township. But they don't want to annex into Harlem Township. And so, if Westerville, we'll get questions at the end. So if Westerville says, Columbus has basically blocked Westerville from annexation. Columbus is saying, we're not interested in annexation. What does that mean for us? Well, that means, I think, that it's possible that in 2050, you come into Harlem Township and it's a 6 mile by 6 mile township that continues to exist in the southeast corner of Delaware County with its own strategic vision, its own character, its own culture, its own community that is unique, that is meeting the demands of not just the township, but of the region, think water, think power, housing, and is a kind of destination location in this part of the world. It's the next slide. So what are our talking points? Harlem Township will be engaged with the city of Columbus and Delaware County to craft an economic development agreement to include, and these are their bullet points for the conversation on Tuesday. An annexation agreement, a JED, infrastructure provisions. It's important that Delaware is part of this conversation because currently, according to the Polaris agreement, Columbus has promised to provide sewer services to the lower tier of the township. We would like them to provide services to the entire township. And so there will be a conversation with Delaware. Delaware actually puts in the infrastructure. Columbus provides that trunk line. And then work with housing solutions. This is a scary part, right? What does that mean? Does that mean that Harlem Township is going to look like Hamilton Road, just outside of New Albany? Are we going to see multi-family units develop in Harlem Township? Well, the beauty is that our zoning commission and strategic planning group have worked very hard to make sure that that doesn't occur in Harlem Township. There are just a couple of areas where there's on one property, 12 units per acre. There's an area in the southern tier where there's 8 units per acre. That's not typically how the township is going to develop. And as Holly and I have talked, we really believe that if the township grows according to our current zoning and overlays, we can help meet Columbus's housing demand. So that you might see by 2040, 2050, this is a scary number, let's say 6,000 to 8,000 new homes in the southern tier of Harlem Township. There's a water study that they're looking at in a 15-county area. Can they provide water to these townships as they grow? And this water study projects just that kind of development in Harlem Township. What's important is if this kind of development occurs, that it occurs in the way we want it to develop. And that means our zoning overlays, our architectural review board, etc. So that the community develops uniquely. It allows us to accomplish our strategic priorities. So, bottom line, it appears at this point in time, on March 29th, on a Saturday morning, that the township may have secured its future. That we may actually exist down the road. There are no promises. These conversations have yet to unfold, but these vital relationships are being developed. And that's where we are. Okay? So, questions or comments?
Is part of the discussion with the city of Columbus with the green corridor?
No, it appears that was part of our initial discussion.
What was the question?
Thank you. Does Columbus desire a growth corridor across the township? And that could be like a park, a green space corridor that allows them to get to Lincoln County. So Columbus, remember, wants these tentacles where they're not boxed in. They want to be able to provide services to Lincoln County, so they want a green growth corridor. What you're going to see in the next years is Columbus will annex the Metroplex. That gets them halfway across the southern tier. But as you look at the maps, it appears they can get to Lincoln County without coming into Harlem Township. And they did not include it as part of the agenda, which I thought was interesting. Yes.
Who is attending the meeting on Tuesday?
Yes, that will be attended by Holly Natty, Joe Simonella, a developer, Pete Griggs, our lawyer, and myself.
Why not the rest of the trustees or maybe other people from the strategic planning committee? Can we get more people there, I guess?
The trustees can't meet because of law together in any setting. And so we are trying very hard to observe those requirements. And so we don't meet more than two of us can't meet together in any other setting.
Can some of the strategic planning committee members attend?
Great question. I would say it's short notice at this point for the upcoming meeting because the participants have already been agreed upon, et cetera. But I think that's a valid discussion point and one that we'll take up. Yeah, not a bad idea. You had a question back here.
Your bold statement about, or the bold thing you had up there about no plans to annex, like today, but like that can always change type thing. So like, how long do those JED agreements and those things, like what's the tenure of those types of things? Are we talking, are those in perpetuity? Are they 5-year deals? How does that all work?
Right. I think Holly could probably speak to that better than I can.
Typically, JEDs are a minimum of 50 years. I've seen them go all the way up to 100 years. So while they're not in perpetuity, they are pretty lengthy number of years.
In my opinion, would be that if we put a strong language there, that I like the word perpetuity. this non-annexation clause is a permanent clause. I think we should, that's should be where we bargain from in this section.
Thank you.
Maybe I'm not understanding, but why, if we don't want development, why are we inviting the sewer trunk lines to come to our township?
It's not that necessarily, well, development is going to occur. We cannot say no to this. What's going to happen is that landowners are going to sell their property to developers, and developers are going to put in sewer. It is absolutely inevitable that this is going to occur. And the beauty is if we can be a part of that process. And so when Delaware does extend the sewer, they come to the trustees and say, here are our options. Which one would you like to pursue as trustees? So that we have a voice in that process. But we truly are at a point as a township where we cannot say no to development.
Why?
It's impossible. It's going to occur.
And I think part of that why is because if I own 20 acres of land and the overlay says you can build 2 houses per acre or 5 houses per acre, and I intend to do that, and I say I need sewage to do that, and you say, no, you can't have it, then I say, great, I will go to court, and the court will say, you can't stop this person from doing that. So now we've got no control. Whereas if we take this approach, we've got the control that says, I can limit that, and then the sewage is provided, and I can tell you, you can't build 100 houses per acre, which is basically an apartment. You can't do that. You can build this. And that, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but in my opinion, and what I think I've heard is, that's why you can't stand up and say, no, we're not gonna have any development.
That's correct. And that's the greatest. That's right.
Yes, you had mentioned a couple areas in the township, in the southern part of the township, that are zoned for higher density housing. Could you tell us what those are?
So there are current areas that have overlay districts, and I wanna make sure it's clear that those overlay districts, that those underlying zonings of those areas, retain their current zoning, and then the overlay is an option for property owners to pull down. Along Fancher Road, there is a mixed-use overlay that has been adopted that would allow up to 12 units per acre near the Smothers Road intersection. As you move east towards the eastern border of the township along Fancher Road, the density drops to 8 units per acre. That was all part of the quick strategy guide, the defensive measure that Trustee Trainer mentioned, because at the time when things were moving quickly, there was concern about potential annexation. So we provided those overlays to help have zoning that would be comparable to neighboring communities to reduce the likelihood of annexation.
So you mean all along Fancher Road?
Yes. But it's an overlay.
Yeah, and what's important there is that has occurred in the last 2 or 3 years, that the zoning commission has worked on these processes with great community input. And I would encourage you to go online, and these are available on the township's website, and you can see exactly where these kind of growth corridors exist.
John?
Steve, and then go ahead.
Yeah, going back to the Tuesday meeting, can you go over again, who are the players?
Yes.
You mentioned the developer, I'd like to know who the developer
Sure.
is.
City of Columbus, you're going to have the Deputy Director, Brian Clark, and a couple of his planners. His Public Works person, her last name is Ava, and I believe a Parks person from Columbus will be there as well. From Delaware County, you will have Tracy Davies, who is the county administrator, Dana McDaniel, who is the county development director, and then from Harlem Township, myself, Holly Nabby, Pete Briggs, who is our legal counsel, has been for several years, and has been heavily engaged in conversations like this, and also Joe Simonella. Joe is a developer who's been working in the township for about 2.5 decades, and actually facilitated the first meeting in the City of Columbus. Joe's role.
I'm sorry, can you spell Joe's?
Yeah, Ciminello.
Not at all how I thought it was
Ciminello.
spelled.
So here's I've said to both Columbus and Delaware, hey, if you don't want Joe to be in this meeting, let me know. I've said to the other trustees, if you don't want Joe to be in this meeting, let me know. I've said to Joe, there are parts of this meeting you need to keep your mouth quiet. And he understands that. And so when we're talking about density, for example, and we're saying to the City of Columbus, we believe our current zoning meets and facilitates your housing goals. Joe, you don't need to comment on that. Because he has a motivation, it's not the townships, right? So let's be honest in our conversation here. Really help the work that you've done to this point, but at this juncture in the conversation, you should keep your mouth quiet. And he's we have a good one.
I'm sorry, just one last question.
Yes, ma'am.
Hold on a minute.
Sorry, John.
So, I think what you're working on is great. I mean, I think there's a lot of possibilities here. I understand Joe's role, and Joe worked with us on the strategic planning committee. He attended probably half of our meetings, maybe more, and brought a lot of input. He helped us craft some of the language in the overlay districts. But he also, as you say, has a direct interest in his business interests. And I realize he helped build some of the bridges into Columbus, but I think you've made enough progress now to have a meeting like this, that having Joe there is really a conflict of interest. I think the optics stink. I mean, I like Joe. I mean, usually he's here. I don't like the optics whatsoever. I don't like the message being sent to other developers who might have interests here in town. Because, I mean, they're all gonna know, right? There's no secret here. So I really think at this point, Joe can remain in the background and provide you input and counsel. But I think it's a major mistake to have him in this meeting, and that's my point of view.
So Steve, I hear what you're saying, and I'm gonna disagree. How's that? I think it's very important that this process be transparent to the community, that we as leaders be very malleable and responsive to the community's needs. Clearly, the word people that agree with Steve. I do believe that it starts to get into tenuous ground. And so, no problem, and Joe will be fine. I'll call him, say, Joe, you're not coming. We'll let you know how it goes. That will be fine. But I hear you. Okay.
But you've talked about Joe Simonella, but is he part of a larger entity, or is he a developer?
He's a developer. Let me tell you how I first met Joe, and then I gotta stop. When we built Harlem Township in '04, we bought at the end of a 100-acre cornfield, just a few acres, built our house. Joe bought the cornfield, and we heard that he wanted to put 12 soccer fields on this cornfield for interstate play, so that RVs would be on that cornfield on the weekends. And I was like, no way. And so I started going around to all my neighbors. I said, we gotta stop this. And when Joe was at the zoning commission, there were more than 100 people in the room. And to his credit, he read the room, and he's like, okay, I'm not gonna do this. And he stepped back from it. And now there are 40 houses on that 100 acres, which is fine. I'd rather have houses than soccer fields with RVs on the weekends. But he responded to the community, and he's been working with the community. He has a vision for Harlow Township, which I appreciate, the energy and the effort. But I agree. Yes, sir.
Okay, I realize that you said it's short notice, but I will, if permitted, clear my day on Tuesday to attend on behalf of the Strategic Planning Committee. I think that this is a heavily loaded meeting with mostly Columbus in representation.
Yeah, Holly says we're taking one out, we'll put one in. So that sounds good. If you could just give me your contact information.
I have it.
Okay,
I
before
have
we leave today, 9:30 up in Delaware County is awesome. Well, I'll give you the specific hours. Sir?
Yep. So I have a couple of questions. I'm Chris Fountain. The first two questions are related to the autonomy. So has there ever been discussion at any level in the township to consider doing something that's a real estate investment trust that would give you the opportunity to work with the farmers, large landowners, and find a way to use that investment to be able to protect and foster the autonomy? The second question is, what about incorporating the township?
Okay, so I'm gonna take the second one first. The steps to incorporation would be number one, home rule. And actually, Adam is engaged on a little homework project to discover what it would be like for Harlow Township to go under home rule. That's something that would have to go on the ballot. It could go on the ballot as soon as spring of next year. Home rule gives us the opportunity to hire our own engineer so that we're not under the auspices of the county. It gives us the opportunity to make decisions about a community authority. It gives us the opportunity to have residential tips so that new growth pays for growth. There are obligations there. We would have to contract the sheriff's department to cover for the township, et cetera. But it's something that might be worth our exploration. And so we're doing that. And then secondly, the incorporation. We're also exploring what that would look like, what are the requirements for incorporation. Holly's already explored that to some extent. And so that's the next level. I think it's in the future, but it's something that we should, I believe, aspire to as a township. That we become a village at some point in the future that really controls our own destiny. So, yes. The second question is very intriguing to me. As a township, we don't have much authority or power, and I don't like that word, but that's an intriguing possibility that it would be fun to talk to developers and large landowners about and see what those possibilities might be. And I think we should explore those kinds of options. Yes. And I would be thrilled to talk to you about what that might be. Yeah. All right, just a couple more, and then I really need to, let me get a new one. Move on. Yes, sir.
Okay, at one point you're talking about the northwestern corner being Helium.
Yes. Yes.
And then you're saying you're still talking with Columbus.
Columbus provides the trunk line.
Go ahead.
Columbus provides the trunk line. Delaware County builds the infrastructure
On the southwest,
on the south side.
up on the north side.
Yeah.
Okay, and you're wanting, at one point you said you were wanting Columbus to do the whole township.
Only to provide, we just want the ability to, I'm gonna use the word drain, to use their trunk line for the entire township. Not for them to build sewer, but for all the sewer to go to that trunk line and for Columbus to take it.
So, and I don't know this for a fact, but is Galena sewer more expensive than Columbus sewer?
I don't know the answer to that
I
question.
mean, I've heard that Galena is very expensive. And those of us that live in that part of the
Yes.
township, nobody came and asked us about it.
Yes, so the Ohio EPA creates what's called a 208 plan, and they kind of designate areas in municipalities to provide sewer to these areas. As a township, we can speak into that plan, but we don't have control of that plan. And so right now, that plan for Delaware County is being worked on. Delaware County is in opposition to the plan as it currently stands. And so it will be interesting to see how that fleshes out. However, now that plan has not been worked on for 20 years, but we're told by the EPA it is a living document, and that even if decisions are made, we can appeal those decisions. And so time will tell. But at this point, there's just a little sliver out there that Galena has been designated as provider 2 for the township.
John?
Sure.
Add to that, the 208, the EPA plan that John references, is really just a document that allows Galena to service a geographical area. It does not force it on any existing infrastructure, aka if you're a resident in that area and you have a septic system, you will not be forced to use any municipality sewer. What we're doing is trying to allow an opportunity for additional development, be it residential or industrial or otherwise, to have that sort of sewer infrastructure. So that, whatever direction that plan goes, it would not impact anyone that currently lives in that area, in terms of sewer use.
But we know when you have an old house, when you have an old septic, there's a big possibility it'll be condemned. Because it's not modern.
That would depend on if the Delaware County General Health District has an issue with your sewer system, not if Galena does, or if Harlan Township does, or if whatever economic development goes into place does. That is a separate issue to creating a relationship with Galena to be able to service new sewer in the area.
And just to that point, one of our goals in these meetings is to bring in subject matter experts to talk to you. Tiffany May, the director of sewer in Delaware County, would be a great person to ask these questions to. I think I've heard her say that Delaware County has never forced someone on a septic system to go into sewer. That may have raised some fears. Sir, this is going to be, all right, 2 more, and then we're done. All right.
All right, just 2 process questions, but first, thank you for the efforts on communication.
Sure.
Thanks. On the overlay, is it the case then that since the zoning's still in place, but the overlay says we're making an exception in this area, is that a zoning variance request then? Is that how it flows through?
So the way the overlay works, I wish I had a little graphic. I have a great graphic that shows it.
I've memorized it. We live in it.
Yeah, so you can retain your underlying zoning. That overlay just covers over top of you. In order to pull down the cloud, a landowner would have to provide a development plan. That goes to the zoning commission, the recommendation to the trustees, and then they would take the final action. It's an administrative action, and it's subject to appeal to the courts. It is not a variance. It's nothing that goes to the Board of Zoning Appeals. It's an actual development plan that runs through the commission and the trustees.
Okay. The second procedural question is kind of along the line here, like the east-west thing, we live on Fancher, so that's near and dear, or just generally enabling massive increase of development through sewer. What is it like Delaware County gets to come in and just say this is where the east-west thing's gonna be, or what kind of pushback can we as a township do?
Yes. So, one of the things that I think we're striving toward is not an adversarial relationship with our neighbors, but a collaborative relationship. That is that we want to work with Chris Bowser, the engineer in Delaware County, and share our vision for a township and see Delaware's thoroughfare plan, their plan for managing traffic across the township align with our strategic vision. Harlan Township has not done a great job of projecting a strategic vision that is aspirational. We've been defensive. This whole process is for us to say, here's who we want to be. This is what we think Center Village will look like in 25 years. Here are the kinds of neighborhoods that we'd like to develop with the appropriate frontage and cluster homes, open fields, etc. So the goal would be that Delaware County doesn't come in and dictate anything to us, but they work with us, that their plan aligns with our vision. I believe that's absolutely possible. Chris Valsman said there will not be road widening occur in the township for a decade. So just take that little nugget. It's going to be a decade before we see widening roads. What you're going to see is roundabouts take the traffic or take the pressure off the intersections. So all in County, you're going to see 3 or 4 new roundabouts, etc. Miller Paul and Fancher, etc. That's how we're going to relieve the pressure. The real changes will occur down the road, and then as you see developments come in and east-west roads develop. We hope with lower speed limits than currently exist, so that it retains a rural feel. It'd be great not to have curves, so it doesn't look like a neighborhood, suburban neighborhood. Those are all things in the future, but we need to articulate that to him and work with his team to accomplish this. So I asked the Delaware County Commissioners, is there any township in Delaware County that you can say, this township has executed a comprehensive plan? 1, they developed it, and 2, they executed it. And to a person, the commissioner said, nope, we can't look to any township. They tended to develop, they have a plan, but it's more haphazard. Remember, we are carte blanche, tabula rasa. We have the opportunity to develop a plan and execute that plan over the next couple of decades. That's a remarkable opportunity that we need to take advantage of. Right, this is going to be the last one, okay?
So maybe it's an observation or comment as you move into the communication and collaboration. I think you're doing a great job of what you said, bring some things together, which is move from the implosion, heal the community, and bring it together. What I saw in the interface of the question was development's coming. I'm not so sure I agree with that. I think that was the main implosion before. So my comment is we move into communication and collaboration. Somehow we need to bring the community together to a common ground. And I don't think we can just say it's coming. I think you need to help the community understand that it is coming, and here's why, and get everyone on the same page. Because if not, there's a vocal, large portion of people that you represent that could end up in the same position as we did before.
Of course, one of the goals of this process is to help in this. Trying to have these soup encounters, getting out to people that are not attending these, to new movements, in particular in the last decade, so essential. So I concur with you, and we need to continue to work hard on this process.
John, may I make one comment?
Yes.
Just one comment.
Yes.
I think the thing is that sewer comes first and then development. You
Yes.
can't do the higher density development without sewer.
Yes.
So I think answering the question why sewer is critically important, and I think that that's what you're probably saying, is it's critically important because that's really gonna be the crux of the conflict really, is why sewer?
Mhm.
If we don't take it, we don't develop, right?
Right.
So we need to answer that question.
Copy.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And next steps are gonna be to have subject matter and.
Yes, and so at the end today, I'll come up and kind of give you here's where we're going. What do we anticipate over the next few months with these meetings and the conversations and work that we're going to be doing?
So, to that point about collaboration and communication, we're gonna break up for about 10 minutes, much like we did the last time. There'll be, Lindsay will be in the back corner there, Holly will be in the back corner there, Ben will be over here, and I will be over here. And we want to go through a similar exercise as we did last time, but around the strategic priority of communication and collaboration. And we want to hear from you what you think is working right now with the township, and what opportunities you feel we have to do things better, differently, new ideas in terms of that collaboration and the communication that you are feeling and seeing here in the township right now. Understanding that there were issues in the past, but we really want to focus on how are we doing right now, and what can we be doing more of, better, differently. So if everybody can just sort of migrate into these corners, we're going to take about 10 minutes to have that conversation with you all, and then we'll come back here out, and then John will go over what's happening next.
Oh, you know how to turn this on? Oh, maybe I did turn it on.
We have that preserve. Forget. It's a park. Because that's right at my corner. I'm the corner of North Pine. The south. No, I'm sorry. The southeast corner. But I had to mention it because you're talking about you're going to cross the town, a whole other township to get here from Galena. My son lives in that what's it called? The community right up right in there. It's a different town. What's right? What's just north of Trent? He lives in Trent. And then there's sewer there. But anyway, I'll just. Okay. Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you. Great. Great. So one of my neighbors. No, 55 I had to talk to
Although now that you're gonna see roundabouts, it's slow everybody down. But I agree with you. I don't find it because they're looking get them from Westerville, get them from the county, where all the where everybody data centers are, all of right. That's
sorry to say,
that's the big thing. I listened to meetings I don't think this provides some opportunity to Well, you know, this is what they do. They have put a lot. So they use roundabouts. I love to work with the land growers. No, I know. Right. All right. Good.
What's it gonna help? What's gonna
Thank you.
The
So I think we need to revisit the decision to freeze how it's working. I would research. Commissioning that work. And again, it can be an evolving answer. But at least be able to hold up in front of it and say, hey, look at it. Here's our vision. We've got vision statements within our yeah, it was really like so I came away from that feeling like, okay, apparently this guy got shit. He's got a crap coming yeah, that's what Rod said. He said, he'll lose some. He said, he'll lose some. He said it wasn't well thought through. Tracy knew nothing about this. Okay, well, I'm around here a week. I've got some stuff going on. Let me know about a couple of options. Clear. So I'm going to come after you on Sunel. I mean, I think that's bad. So, I think that just sort of clears
I think he'll be fine.
fine with it, but I agree, we should make. I think if we become aware of it, clear, I think it'll be good. It's March. I know.
Okay, if you could begin to make your way back to your seats, that'd be great.
Yeah, we can report out real quick.
So I'm gonna just briefly summarize what we heard in our group, and then Holly and Lindsay and Ben will do the same. One thing that we heard loud and clear is that people really appreciate these meetings, and having a chance to hear updates and to share their thoughts and feelings and ask questions, and that they love the word collaboration, that's a really important concept, and that they're appreciative of that. We did hear great feedback and great ideas. One was that there was a resounding agreement that there was some sort of town center concept that the community really liked from the last meeting that didn't seem to be reflected in the document that we created. So we're going to take that back and add that in and add in additional feedback from today, in fact, and then additional feedback from the soup sessions. So that document that you received today that summarizes that first session is not a final document. That is a living, breathing document. You'll see maybe not completely different, but a different version of that all along the way, so that it's reflecting the ongoing conversation. We heard an idea to put the soup session toolkit online so that people can access that electronically and hold their conversations and provide that feedback. So we will be doing that. An idea of sort of a welcome wagon that the Civic Association has been tossing around for a while now. Is there some way we can update and engage new residents? In these meetings, we need to use this microphone and repeat the question. That was a great piece of feedback. That the pizza box toppers at the local pizza place are a great way to communicate, and can we capitalize on that to get the word out about things the township's doing? There's too much jargon and acronyms in our newsletter. Things that people don't understand, things that are terminology that don't make sense to normal humans that don't work in the space that Holly works in all the time. So we need to do a better job of keeping things simple and clarifying and showing what does that mean for us as residents when you talk about an overlay or you talk about a TIF. What is that and why should I care, right, as a normal resident here? So simplifying things. More proactive outreach about meetings. Lindsay and I were actually talking about that right before this meeting about, just needing to constantly be reminding people. So I'm taking the point that we can do more of that. Ensuring that we continue non-electronic communication from the township because not everybody's online. And maybe exploring the idea of a community kiosk that's not in the shelter house, but like actually outside, maybe along the path at the park, as a way to get information out to you. Those are our key points. Did I miss anything, team? Okay.
Great ideas. My group also had great feedback as far as they feel that the transparency has increased in the township. They love that they're seeing more documents in print that they can hand and read. They're also seeing more emails, being able to understand when meetings are coming. So they had a lot of positive feedback on the communication efforts that they've seen over the past few months. They also had a lot of great ideas as well. So one of the residents suggested having signs in front yards, kind of like you see sometimes when the zoning is changing on a property, but have like little signs that say community meeting and have a QR code that property owners can put out before we have one of these meetings to try to get word out that way. They said you also do that a lot with the community dinners, that you have little signs for those, like same concept. Put them out in these meetings. They also think we need to have a committee that will go knock on doors and just tell their neighbors that there's a meeting coming up. You should come and learn more at these meetings. They also talk about flyers of businesses, so I love the pizza box idea. That's great. They talked about needing more education to residents to know what are some of these terms. So again, it goes back to what you're saying. These terms are not something that the everyday person person understands. So more education on what is inevitable, that they hear that say that it's coming, and that's all they hear, so why is it coming? And educating folks on that. So I said, how do you educate them? What are your suggestions on how we get that word out? They suggested having a real estate agent meeting to help them have the education, and then they can inform as residents are trying to sell and purchase property. Having a one-pager on our website that explains everything on the township website. They suggested some targeted communication along specific corridors that may have more population and being able to get the word out to those higher population areas. And then just having a common vocabulary, common talking points document on the township's website. There was also discussion of wanting to have better understanding of Delaware County's plans and making sure that the information regarding Delaware County's different plans is out there for the community as well. And then we talked about the young population because that seems to be an underrepresented demographic, and I said that is not a Harlem Township problem, that is everywhere we go. So we talked about different ways to maybe get them involved. Maybe have a form on the website that they can go to and just give feedback electronically. There was a suggestion about having a QR code that would allow them to provide them specific information just so that it's available when they have time to look at it. We talked about going to them. Can we go to the soccer fields? Where else do they go? Let's go to them and give them information there. There was a suggestion of making TikTok video and putting it out there for them to be aware of. And then the other idea was using the Girl Scouts model. Just you see them at the grocery store handing out, trying to sell their cookies. Maybe we have a committee that is at local businesses or different places that can go around and provide information as people are going in and out of businesses. And then the last thing that we talked about is that there seems to be a lot of confusion about who's making the final decision on things. So if, for example, the strategic plan is a township trustee's decision and the strategic priorities will be identified by the trustees, everyone was saying maybe you have to vote on that as a township, because that's what was going to be done with the merger. And so that's not necessarily the way that a strategic plan gets adopted. It's a trustee's action. And maybe there's other actions that are from other partners of Delaware County, like the sewers. Those are all different entities that have the power to adopt things. So making sure that residents understand what is being considered and who has the decision-making power on that particular matter, and being able to clearly identify that in some manner, whether it's on the website or handout, newsletter, etc. And just making sure that everybody's aware of those things. So that's it. Did I miss anything? All right.
We thought that there was a good basis of communication, but that there was so much information that it was very difficult to either set aside time to understand everything that's going through, or just people just not anywhere. So focusing more on small group sessions across the township geographically, trying to capture a lot more people's voices, getting a lot more of the information out to picking up that communication, making sure that, their information parallels our information.
I really get back to my corner here. Okay, real quick, if you haven't met, my name is Nancy, I represent our Harlem Township Communications Committee, and over in our corner, we have a lot of the same sentiments. So, starting with our strengths, just the fact that we've started a process, we've created a process to try to help improve communication and collaboration is a strength. In addition, we're an engaged community with frequent community events, so that's a positive of Harlem Township, especially with how rural we are, the fact that we bring people together so much. And then lastly, that just the people in general are engaged and motivated, as long as they know what's going on. So we know that if we're getting the word out, that people are going to show up every time. In terms of opportunities, we talked about how we need to break down and help people understand their current situation and risk. In addition, the outside factors that may influence them, depending on their geographic area in the township. Because we've got a lot of things happening in the different corners, and we want people to understand what specifically is they are at risk for, or that could be influencing them in their area of the township. In addition, just making our zoning, making all of our documents more visible to residents, which goes along with another opportunity that we had of improving the organization of the township website and making information more easily accessible for residents to find, and even pushing it out to residents more frequently. Next, a similar sentiment is using the mail more. Mailing monthly, mailing every time there's updates, figuring out in our township budget with printing and mailing at the beginning of the year, how we can make sure that printed materials and mail are a more frequent part of our communication and not just relying on digital materials. I really like this one, using our existing community events as a way to share our information. We have really engaged committees and the Harlem Township Heritage and our Tree Noodle dinners, and we need to be distributing information at those places as well. Further subject matter education, which is something that every group has said so far. And then improving attendance at our monthly meetings, like we have our zoning and our trustee and our BZA. Things are happening in these meetings, discussions are happening, and we want to improve attendance at those meetings. And then finally, just talking to our neighbors more, just making sure that we're all communicating with each other and we know what's going on with our neighbors. And that's it.
Thanks for the feedback. That gives us a lot of things to work on, which we will do. What we are engaged in is identifying strategic priorities. Once those priorities are identified, we'll do more work along the lines of what you just did, which is look at the goals. How do we accomplish those strategic priorities? And there are some that are very significant. One that I'd like to talk about that will happen in concurrence with what we're doing is the development of an economic development plan. Dana McDaniel, who is the Economic Development Director in Delaware County, will probably be with us the next time. He will be working with the Montrose Corporation, with Holly and others to develop an economic plan for the township that looks at our zoning, our overlays, and how do we accomplish what we'd like to accomplish in an economically feasible way. If the township is built out, what kind of funds are generated through that process? With the mindset that new growth funds development, not current residents. So that's a process that will unfold over the next few months, that at the end of this, we've got a strategic plan wedded to an economic development plan that sets course for the township's future. And I'd like Dana to come and present to you what that looks like and why that's so important. We envision field trips. That is our steering committee members leading groups of residents into neighboring communities with questionnaires, asking ourselves, what are the characteristics, what's the quality, what kind of planning would need to develop this kind of community? And whether you're looking at New Albany, or Dublin, or Powell, etc., taking lessons from how these communities have developed and bringing the best to our conversation and accenting our process by that information. I think it would be great if we even sat down with community leaders in that process and let them talk to us about the things that they've learned. Subject matter experts, talking about infrastructure development, whether that's sewer or electricity, partnering with corporate and industrial partners, talking about One Columbus or the Greater Columbus, Greater Ohio Business Roundtable, and talking to experts that will help find partners that align with our culture, our priorities, and what to grow with our vision, not impose something that's external or alien to us. And that includes developers as well. We need to hear from them. We need to continue to work on training the character and the quality and the culture of this place. That's why we're having this conversation. That's why we need outside experts to help us along. One caveat, the schools. We haven't brought up the schools. This is an important aspect of our planning. They are integral to our future. If we're talking about adding hundreds or thousands of residents to this township over the next quarter century, that's going to impact the schools. So they need to be partnering with us in this process. And we hope to include them as well, that they're not an addendum, they're not something that we do things to, but that we do things with. And so that's kind of the roadmap a little bit for the future. Keep an eye out for the next one of these kinds of meetings, and we'll continue to do our very best to keep you informed, to capture what you've said today, and to pass this along.
And don't forget to sign up for the soup session.
Yes, don't forget to sign up for the soup session. If you do take a mason jar, just give us your name and contact information. That would be great.
In reference to those soup sections and other things, how soon before all of this information that we've compiled today is on the website? So if we want to reference that to our soups, that how soon before that comes out? You know,
Early next week.
Early next week. We're making a promise. Early next week. All right. Thank you so much for your time today. Happy to stick around and engage in conversation or answer questions. No problem. Thank you.